got to get to this first topic, though, because we know this is a big, big move that happened this weekend, man. The Pittsburgh Steelers hiring Brian Flores as the senior defensive assistant and linebackers coach, man. First off, this is just crazy that, he actually is with the organization now, right? Because when he first got fired down in Miami, we talked about him being a guy that should be a candidate for a head coaching opportunity. Even in the sense that we talked on how they were supposed to be tanking. They were supposed to have bad seasons, but yet and still, he turns in back-to-back winning seasons. And more importantly, we talk about how good that defense looked, even in the sense of, them having the quarterback issues between Fitzpatrick, Josh Rosen, Tua Tagovailoa. So when I thought of all that, I'm saying to myself, like, dude, for us to get that type of guy on this staff is insane. I mean, when's the last time we had a coach of that pedigree as a position coach? Like, this is nuts to me, man.
Oh, yeah, position coach. I was going to bring up Haley just because he was
but he was a coordinator,
OC out in Arizona, but yeah, he was OC. Right. And that's the thing. Remember whenever we had the DC spot open, I know Flores was still looking for head coaching jobs.
Right.
He sued the NFL around that time, so there were some things
and the lawsuit is still going on.
I was all for, oh man, can we get him at DC? Yeah. I feel like that would have been an amazing hire for us, but we still felt like, he's going to try to at least still get a head coach. But then we hired Terrell Austin. Yeah. Don't really hear much about Flores in terms of coaching or what he's going to be doing job-wise. Then all of a sudden, this just comes out of nowhere, and huge pleasant surprise, in my opinion.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. Like, for me, just thinking of what he's going to bring to this defense, when you're talking about the impact, right? You can never have enough elite defensive minds in the building together. Even though we understand that Coach Thomas is still going to have his hand in some of the game day play calling, when you're talking about the preparation and when you're talking about cultivating that plan, right? Because I always say, like, with Coach Tomlin, he is the quote unquote master chef. He's the Gordon Ramsay of it. And Keith Butler was like his, sous chef. He was the guy that was right next to him, right under him. Anything he needed, it's like, all right, I'm going to prep it. I'm going to go get all the groceries. I'm going to do everything throughout the week. But on game day, you're the showman, So when I think of Brian Flores and I say to myself, well, who do I think is a better version of Keith Butler in that role? Well, Brian Flores should excel, in a situation like that, because to me, I just think that, man, his understanding of personnel, his understanding of players, his understanding of even in some difficult situations, how to keep his players motivated, how to keep his players responding to him. I don't think that can go unnoticed, And when you talk about that Dolphins roster, we didn't speak of them as having some elite talent across the board, like how we talk about the Steelers at times. And for him to still be able to generate success with that group, I'm just asking myself, what is he going to do when he gets his hands on a TJ Watt, on a Cam Hayward, even on a Devin Bush, a Minkah Fitzpatrick, like those type of guys that, have either already continued to take that next step, or guys like Devin, who we have a little bit more, we want our higher expectations for him. We want him to kind of reach those things. Brian Flores, he opens up that door to potentially all of that right there.
Well, you hear this stuff people are bringing up about him and Minkah, though, right?
Yeah. Well, because that was a big part of the reason why Minkah wanted to leave, just in the sense of the usage. And I would also say this. I don't personally think it was just usage. I think it was usage along with the losing, because you remember at the time when the trade happened, the Dolphins were getting their head kicked in. I think the Ravens had
those
put
first 2 games, didn't they?
Yeah, the Ravens put 50 on them. Right. So it's like, if I'm a player, I could totally understand the frustration. The difference is he was a first-round pick. So when you're a first-round draft pick, you have a little bit more pull and power in the sense of saying, hey, I'm not happy with this. I don't like the way you're using me. If we're going to be tanking, go ahead and trade me. So with him doing that, I didn't have the issue with it. And I personally don't think that it's going to remain an issue between Brian Flores and Minkah, because here in Pittsburgh, what's the difference between, here in Miami? We're not getting beat by 50, or at least we shouldn't be, right? And for the majority of the time, like, our organization is way more stable. I feel like the leadership in this organization is way more better, and clearly it's not dealing with some of the accusations that those guys in Miami were dealing with on top of that. So yeah, man, when you throw all that in, I'm like, why would you be happy for Minkah Fitzpatrick being down there? You're young in your career, rookie year, and you're getting moved, or his second year in the league, but they're moving him around and things like that. You just want to get settled, and you feel like if you get settled, then you have a chance to really have an impact and then ultimately help your team win. But when he doesn't feel like he was getting that, you voice your frustration. So for me, I'm cool with that. I just think that as a whole, it's going to be water under the bridge once he gets out here.
That was like one of the last things on my mind.
Yeah.
I borderline forgot about it. I think it was less about Flores. Wasn't Minka getting misused his rookie year anyway?
Yes, and that was
Flores
the thing.
Came in.
Correct.
He probably saw Minka's talent and was like, dude, you could probably be a do-it-all guy, move to nickel, play all these different positions. Yeah. But I'm sure Minka just had distrust because he went from one coach rookie year, now with Flores.
Yeah.
You see the organization pseudo-tanking. Yeah, you don't want to be around for that. So I thought it was less about Flores and more about distrust with the organization and where his career was heading down in Miami.
No, I definitely would agree with that, man. I definitely would. And that's, like I said, for me, why I don't really feel like it's going to be an issue. I think going forward, man, I expect Minka to continue to excel. I think Minka under Flores and Coach Tomlin and even Terrell Austin, I mean, those are three guys that understand defense, but more importantly, have intimate knowledge, especially Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin with the secondary. And we've seen since Terrell has been here, the impact it's had on that secondary. So now when you bring in a guy like Flores as well, I just think that all three of those guys working in concert together is going to be very impressive, man. I'm excited to see it now, man.
I know. I'm real pumped about
who would have thought
and bringing him in.
Who would have thought a hire like this would make us get all giddy?
Downside to it at all? Am I wrong? There, nothing bad to say about this hire. Bringing in an elite defensive mind and to your coaching staff, like who doesn't want that on their team?
Right. Now, in terms of potential negatives, right? The only things that you have to acknowledge is the lawsuit still. That is still ongoing. And obviously, the further it gets into litigation, the more it's going to get talked about potentially for distractions, right? So you imagine if you're in October, November, or even in December, and Flores had to, issue a statement or have to do something in litigation, and now that's going to continue to get talked about a little bit. It could be a distraction. And I could see people being a little bit nervous about that or hesitant, asking themselves, hey, man, do we want to bring that on, knowing that we're going to have a new quarterback, knowing that we're going to have some transitional pieces offensively and defensively. But what I would say is this, man, if there's any organization that can handle outside noise, it is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I speak from experience because with Coach Tomlin, we've had to endure situations like that. Everybody remembers the national anthem situation. Obviously, when President Trump at the time made his comments, I mean, it was crazy just going into the facility, death threats, things like that. But the one constant, even in the midst of the turmoil going outside of us, even in the midst of some of the dysfunction within our roster, just from, personal grievances or personal issues with individuals, Coach Tomlin always made it clear what the goal was. He always made it clear why we are all here today. And I just thought, man, when he did that, you saw the season that we ended up having that year as well. I mean, we were racking off those wins back to back to back to back. And it just became that focus of, while everything around us is going crazy, if we keep winning, that'll keep us sane. That'll keep us calm. And I just think that, man, with a guy like Coach Tomlin, regardless of what is brought up down the line with this Flores lawsuit, I just think that as a whole, he's going to be able to keep this team together. He's going to be able to keep this team focused on, the task at hand, which is ultimately trying to win another championship.
Well, not only that, I was watching Flores' interview with I Am Athlete and like Brandon Marshall and Ocho Cinco yesterday. And he's about the same exact thing. He even said the standard is the standard. And I don't think he's going to try to be a distraction at all. He's going to make it about football when he's in the building, all about the team, trying to put your best foot forward and that type of stuff. Because if anything, too, the lawsuit, I'm just taking a guess on this. The players are just going to react only in a positive way to the lawsuit and being in the building because he's standing up for something he believes in.
Yes. And think about this. As a minority, what did we say the NFL is largely made up of in terms of the players? It's predominantly minorities. So when they look at Brian Flores, they see him as what? The beacon of hope, the guy who is revolting. He is the modern day William Wallace in an extent to the NFL because he is standing up to the organization. He is standing up to the corporation in terms of the NFL and their brass, right? When you start messing with those guys, lawsuits against those guys, we know, man, that's a very powerful bunch. But the fact that he has a Mr. Rooney in his corner, I think that's huge for him. I don't think that, this works anywhere else realistically because of that, because of the way Mr. Rooney operates, and obviously having the Rooney rule as well. I just think that he is kind of like that one-off where it's like, hey, in the midst of this lawsuit, in the midst of the potential tension between ownership and Brian Flores, Mr. Rooney can be that buffer. He can be that in between that brings Brian Flores on the staff, but at the same time shields him a little bit from all the other owners just trying to pile up on him, which we know they can do at times. So to me, man, like I said, I just think that this is still going to be a very positive situation. I think the players are going to react very positively from it as well, because I know if I was in their boat, I would as well. I would love this hire. If I'm Devin Bush right now, if I'm Robert Spillane right now, if I'm TJ, Alex Highsmith, man, I am hyped as heck because I know I have a stand-up guy in terms of not just on field, but a guy that if he sees or hears some foolishness going on, like the allegations about tanking and things like that, he's not going to stand for that. And as a player, as a man, that's all you want. You want a guy that is going to be real with you, right, wrong, or indifferent. A guy that, you know, even if it's frowned upon, even if the majority doesn't like it, he's saying, hey, look, this is who I am. And that's all you can ask for, man. So for me, man, like I said, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that is the other positive. You know we ain't tanking this year because we hired him.
Hey, ain't that the truth? That's the day-going truth.
No, but yeah, I don't think the lawsuit will be a distraction at all. Like, he's not going to bring that into work. He's talked about it many times. He's like, I just want to coach football. I know I'm put on. And
he was very clear. He's been very clear with that since the beginning of this lawsuit, because that was, remember what we said? We said, man, we felt that, you know, when the whole Kaepernick situation happened, that was the one thing that he really didn't do enough of, was put emphasis on, hey, I still want to play. I still want to be out there. It was more so he focused so much on the activism part that the message became skewed. It became, oh, he doesn't want to play anymore. He just wants to do this. In all actuality, it's like, no, he still did want to play. But with Brian Flores, he made sure from the beginning to be very clear, be very concise about his messaging that, hey, man, I want to coach. This is my calling. This is my passion. This is what I do. I love it. And for me, man, I'm just glad that that did not get convoluted. It did not get, you know, hijacked in a sense, because he did not continue to put emphasis on that. So for me, man, like I said, I just think that, man, he's handled this situation as best he could, because we know this is not an easy thing to deal with.
Okay, so we could take this in a few different directions.
Yeah.
What do you think of the hire in terms of his role, not only this season, but potentially long term? Because people are starting to bring up, oh, is he the potential replacement for Tomlin if Tomlin wants to retire? Could he beat out Terrell Austin for the DC role as early as this year even, you know? And then, worst case, you know, he could just take over the DC next year if he wants.
Right. So,
how do you view it? Because from my standpoint, I'm just like, bro, we got in a really great coach. Can we just focus on this year? Because for him, he's really overqualified for this right now. So if this is just some type of stepping stone for him to try to get back into head coaching next year, I'll take it. I don't really have that high of expectations for him being here long term, but I think that will be awesome if he is.
Yeah, so what I'll say is this, man. In terms of him beating out Terrell Austin for DC, I don't think that that's on the table right now. I don't think that they're going to try to make it a competition between those two guys, because they literally just hired Terrell Austin, and he's actually been in the system, right, for multiple years. He had to kind of earn his keep in terms of moving up, right? But if you think about when we brought in Terrell Austin, he had similar titles as well, didn't he? He wasn't just the secondaries coach. You know, he had one of those cool executive, you know, defensive assistant, senior assistant type titles as well. So you could see with the title, number one, it guarantees pay being a little bit higher. But number two, it just gives you a little bit more credential, right? So whenever you are ready to bump back up, whether you're talking coordinator or head coaching role, you have a title that qualifies you for that. So when I think of him being, you know, the senior defensive assistant, well, hey, man, whenever he does decide to go back to either being a coordinator or even potentially a head coach again, he's going to be able to say that, hey, when I got fired, I didn't go back and just be a linebackers coach. No, I was a senior defensive assistant as well as a linebackers coach. You know what I mean? Yeah, because they're two different levels. If you're just a linebackers coach, you're only focused on those linebackers, whether it's inside or outside guys, right? But you're not dealing with the D line. You're not dealing with the corners or the safeties or the overall schematics and game plan of the defense. Whereas now, as senior defensive assistant, you are included in those meetings. You are included when they're talking about some of the personnel decisions, when they're asking, hey, is 55 still a good player, or should we move 55? He's going to be in those conversations now because he's the senior defensive assistant. So for me, man, I don't think, like I said, I don't think they're going to need to move him or make him defensive coordinator by title at any part in this season. But what I will say is this, in terms of how long do I think he stays here in Pittsburgh? I look at it like a 2-year rental at best, because I know that he's going to want to be a head coach again. My concern is this. I just don't feel like it's going to happen within these next 3 years, largely because of the lawsuit. The NFL does not like to be sued, man. They don't want to ever look bad. And we know when they find a way to escape or get out, they're going to do whatever it needs to do. They're going to do whatever they need to do to ultimately make that happen. So with a guy like Brian Flores, I just don't know organizationally outside of Pittsburgh who is bringing him in, knowing some of the stuff that, he's been dealing with, right? Because if you happen to be an organization that may be borderline needing to tank, what is that dynamic going to look like when Flores comes in? Because you have to remember, Flores isn't going to be going to an established team if he goes back to being a head coach. Most of the time, the jobs that are open are the jobs that, the team won 2 games, 4 games, 6 games. So they're project pieces. And when I think of all of that, I just don't know how comfortable a owner or GM might be bringing Flores in, knowing what he's already been on record standing against. Even though we know that, hey, that's the best way to go about it in terms of, hey,
that's the right thing to do. You have much respect for Flores. He's like, right. Bro, I'm just not tanking. I have too much respect for the game. We're all out here trying to win. Right.
But we know at times it's like, if you could get a better draft pick, could that help change the face of your organization? I'm sure Cincinnati would attest to that by them getting Joe Burrow and then trying to get Jamar Chase. Yeah, absolutely. So when I think of that, it's like, I see the pros and cons to both of it, but from an integrity perspective, I'm just like, man, why would you want to tank? As a player, it's just something that just feels like taboo. You know what I mean? Like, you don't tank? Like, what? I'm not going out here and knowing I'm going to lose? Like, nah, I ain't signed up for that.
No, knowing I'm going to lose so you could maybe draft someone to replace me.
Like, come on, man, what I look like?
Yeah.
All right, but we did get a couple supers. Let me read the. Did you have anything else you want to get real quick?
I think we're good, because maybe the next thing is just Devin Bush, but we're gonna touch on that next topic. So
yeah, absolutely. So let's see what we got in the supers. On the
Brian Flores. It's just a really good hire, all around hire. I mean,
yeah, man. Like I said, even with I was like, if you had to put a con on it, it's just that we know, the lawsuit is still going to be going on. We know that he's probably going to be looking to bump back up to a coordinator role, or at least a head coaching role, in the next couple of years, realistically. So you just know that this is going to be a short thing. But what I will say is this: if he does change his mind and he does happen to love it here in Pittsburgh, well, if Coach Tomlin and, in the future, he's like, I'm ready to leave. Well, we would have that in-house guy that we always talk about, right? And we always say, hey, in Pittsburgh, we really don't have a guy that if Tomlin were to leave, we feel confident as the successor. Well, now I think we do.
What's interesting about that, though, is we had that guy back whenever Cowher left and Russ Grimm, and we went completely off the rails and went with Tomlin.
You're right. You're right. You told me that.
Yeah. I don't know how much we should look into him potentially being the successor to Tom. At least right now, I think it's a great thing just to get him in-house, because say in a year he leaves for a coordinator spot somewhere else. Tomlin in 4 or 5 years says, you know what, man, I've done everything. I already got the Super Bowl. Hopefully he gets another one here in the next 4 or 5. He's like, I want to hang it up. We got that connection to Flores now. Maybe he comes over here.
Call him up,
DC
like, yo,
to head coach. Exactly.
I think BF, what you doing, bro?
It only helps for multiple reasons. On the field, for connections down the line, bringing in an in-house guy as head coach, maybe. But I could see Tomlin, though, coaching for another 10 years.